Jake Morrison had enough. He sat in the big round room where aliens from all over the galaxy came to talk and make decisions. The room was huge and made of some kind of crystal that sparkled when light hit it. Around him sat creatures that looked nothing like humans. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others had 4 eyes or scales instead of skin. A few looked like giant insects with wings. Jake was the human ambassador. His job was to speak for all humans in this place called the Galactic Council. For 2 years now, he had been coming to these meetings. For 2 years, he had been asking the same things over and over. And for 2 years, nothing had happened. Today was different, though. Today, Jake felt something break inside his chest. The alien with purple tentacles was talking again. Her name was hard to say, so Jake just called her the tentacle lady in his head. She was saying the same things she always said. Humans were too new. Humans were too eager to fight. Humans needed to wait and learn patience. Jake looked down at his tablet. On the screen were pictures that made his stomach hurt. Houses on fire, ships blown apart, bodies floating in space, all human, all dead because pirates kept attacking human colonies while these aliens sat in their fancy crystal room and talked about being patient. The big alien that looked like a walking tree was nodding along with the tentacle lady. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together when he spoke. He said humans were dangerous because they grew too fast and built too many ships. He said maybe if pirates attacked human colonies, it would teach humans to slow down. Lisa Bryant sat next to Jake. She was a commander in the Earth Defense Force and wore a black uniform with silver buttons. Jake could see her hands squeeze into fists when the tree alien talked about human deaths like they were a good thing. Jake had brought Lisa to show the council how serious humans were about protecting themselves. But these aliens did not care about human soldiers or human weapons. They only cared about keeping things the way they had always been. The oldest alien in the room finally spoke. Nobody knew what his race was called. He was so old that his skin looked like leather and his eyes were milky white. When he talked, everyone got quiet. Even Jake felt a chill run down his back. "Young human," the old alien said in a voice like whisper, "your species has been in space for less than 100 years. We have been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Perhaps you should listen more and demand less." Jake felt his face get hot. He thought about the 3,000 people who died last month when pirates attacked the Kepler colony. He thought about the children who would never grow up. He thought about the families destroyed while these aliens formed committees to study the problem. "Listen to what?" Jake asked, standing up. His voice was louder than he meant it to be. "Listen to you talk about how humans need to be patient while our people die. Listen to you make excuses for why you cannot help us." The tentacle lady made a sound like a laugh. "Humans are so emotional. This is why your species cannot be trusted with important decisions. You react with feelings instead of thinking." Something snapped in Jake's mind. He grabbed his tablet and threw it down on the crystal table. The sound was so loud that several aliens jumped in their seats. "Emotional?" Jake shouted. "You want to know what is emotional? Watching your people get killed while others who could help choose to do nothing. You want to know what is emotional? Begging for help from creatures who think human lives are worth less than their comfort." Lisa stood up next to Jake. Her hand moved to the weapon on her belt, not to draw it, but just to remind everyone it was there. Several aliens noticed and moved back in their seats. The tree alien leaned forward on his 4 arms. "You see, this is exactly what we mean. Humans turn to violence too quickly. Your species is unpredictable and dangerous." Jake looked around. The room had all the alien faces staring at him. Some looked scared. Some looked angry. A few looked like they were enjoying the show. None of them looked like they cared about helping humans. "You know what?" Jake said, his voice getting calm and cold. "You are right about one thing. Humans are dangerous. We are dangerous to pirates who attack our families. We are dangerous to anyone who threatens innocent people. And right now we are dangerous to this council, because we are the only ones here who actually want to do something instead of just talk." He started gathering up his papers and files. Lisa helped him, moving quickly and keeping her eyes on the aliens around them. "What are you doing?" asked the tentacle lady. Something that has never happened before in your 3,000 years of talking, Jake said. Humanity is leaving this council. We quit. We do not need you. A wave of shocked sounds went through the room. Aliens turned to each other and made noises Jake could not understand. Some stood up from their seats. Others seemed to freeze in place. The old alien at the head of the table raised one wrinkled hand. The room got quiet again. Ambassador Morrison, he said slowly, you may wish to think about this choice. The galaxy can be very hard on those who stand alone. There are many dangers out there for a species without friends. Jake stopped at the door and turned back. For a moment, he felt scared. The old alien was right. Humans were new to space travel. They did not have many ships or weapons compared to these ancient races. There were things in the dark between stars that could destroy entire worlds. But then he thought about the people of Kepler colony again. He thought about other human settlements that were depending on him to protect them. He thought about how these aliens had failed them. You are right, Jake said. The galaxy is dangerous, but humans have never stood alone. We stand together. And together we will take care of our own problems since you will not help us. He turned to Lisa. Commander, we are leaving. Yes, sir, Lisa said with a smile. As they walked toward the door, Jake heard the aliens behind them start talking all at once. Their voices mixed together in a sound like a storm. He knew they were probably talking about what this meant. In 3,000 years, no species had ever quit the Galactic Council. Jake did not care. He was tired of begging for help from creatures who thought humans were children. He was tired of watching his people die while aliens formed committees. Most of all, he was tired of being treated like humans did not matter. The door closed behind them with a soft sound. In the hallway, Lisa looked at Jake with worry in her eyes. Sir, she said quietly, do you think we did the right thing? Jake thought about it for a moment. He thought about all the things that could go wrong now. Without the council, humans would have to face pirates alone. Other alien races might decide humans were enemies now. There would be no protection from the big galactic laws. But he also thought about the 3,000 dead people from Kepler colony. He thought about how the council had done nothing to help them. He thought about how these aliens saw humans as pets or children instead of equals. I do not know if we did the right thing, Jake said honestly. But I know we did the only thing we could do and still look at ourselves in the mirror. They walked down the long crystal hallway toward their ship. Behind them, the sounds of arguing. Aliens grew quieter. Ahead of them was space, and somewhere in that space was Earth and all the human colonies that were now completely on their own. Jake hoped he had made the right choice. But right or wrong, it was made now. Humanity would have to live with the consequences. 3 weeks had passed since Jake Morrison walked out of the Galactic Council chambers. President Helen Carter sat in her office in the White House on Earth, looking at reports that made her stomach feel sick. The papers on her desk told a story she did not want to read but had to understand. Across from her sat 2 of her most trusted advisors. Ryan Walsh was the Secretary of Defense, a tall man with gray hair who had served in the Earth military for 30 years. Patricia Kim was the Director of Interstellar Affairs, a smart woman who knew more about alien politics than anyone else on Earth. Both of them looked as worried as Helen felt. Tell me how bad it is, Helen said, pushing the reports away from her. Ryan cleared his throat and looked down at his notes. It is very bad, Madam President. The purple tentacle aliens, the Zilithians, stopped all trade with human settlements within 6 hours of us leaving the council. They will not buy our goods or sell us anything we need. Patricia nodded and added, the tree-like aliens, the Vorthans, have closed their space borders to all human ships. That means our fastest trade routes to the inner galaxy are now blocked. Our merchant ships have to take paths that are 3 times longer and much more dangerous. Helen rubbed her forehead where a headache was starting to form. When Jake had made his dramatic exit from the council, it had felt like the right thing to do. The aliens had been treating humans like children for too long. But now the real costs were becoming clear. What about our mining operations? She asked. Ryan's face got darker. 3 of our biggest mining stations in neutral space have been shut down. The aliens running those sectors say we have violated regulations that did not exist last month. They made up new rules just to hurt us. Patricia leaned forward in her chair. The psychological impact is huge too. People in our colonies are scared. Many are asking if we made a mistake by leaving the council. Some are even talking about moving back to Earth or other core human worlds. Helen stood up and walked to the big window behind her desk. Outside, she could see protesters gathered on the street. Some held signs supporting the decision to leave the council. Others demanded that humanity try to rejoin immediately. The country was divided just when it needed to be united most. What about our ability to defend ourselves? Helen asked without turning around. Ryan shuffled his papers uncomfortably. That is where things get really complicated. Several alien species that used to ignore us are now treating us like a threat. The hegemony has moved 3 war fleets close to our outer colonies. They say it is for defensive purposes, but we know better. Helen felt a chill run down her spine. The hegemony was one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. If they decided humans were enemies, it would be a very short war. A soft beeping sound came from the door. Danny Foster, Helen's personal aide, entered the room quickly. His face was pale and he was breathing hard like he had been running. "Madam President," Danny said, trying to catch his breath. "We are getting emergency reports from our deep space monitoring stations. There is a massive Ravager fleet gathering in the Vega sector." The room went completely silent. Helen, Ryan, and Patricia all stared at Danny with horror on their faces. The Ravagers were the nightmare that kept every civilized species awake at night. They were pirates, but not ordinary ones. They traveled in huge fleets, destroying entire star systems and taking everyone they found as slaves. "How many ships?" Ryan asked in a whisper. Danny looked at his tablet with shaking hands. "Intelligence estimates at least 200 ships, maybe more. It is the biggest Ravager fleet anyone has seen in 50 years. Helen felt like someone had punched her in the stomach. A Ravager fleet that size could destroy multiple human colonies before any defense could stop them. And now, without the Council's protection, humans would have to face them completely alone. She turned back to face her advisors. Both Ryan and Patricia looked like they had aged 10 years in the last few minutes. "What are our options?" Helen asked, though she was afraid to hear the answer. Patricia spoke first. "We could try to negotiate with individual alien species. Maybe some of them would be willing to help us if we ask nicely and offer them something valuable in return." Ryan shook his head. "That would take weeks or months. We do not have that kind of time." He paused and looked directly at Helen. "Our other option is to fight them ourselves. Show the galaxy that humans can handle threats like the Ravagers without anyone's help." Helen walked back to her desk and sat down heavily in her chair. The weight of making decisions for all of humanity felt like a mountain on her shoulders. Every choice she made now could decide whether humans would survive as a spacefaring species or be wiped out by forces too big to fight. "How long do we have?" she asked Danny. The young man checked his tablet again. "At their current speed and direction, the Ravager fleet will reach human space in 8 days. 8 days. Helen had 8 days to make a decision that would affect every human being alive. She thought about the colonies full of families who had trusted their government to protect them. She thought about the brave men and women in the Earth Defense Force who would have to fight impossible odds. She thought about Jake Morrison and his angry words in the council chambers 3 weeks ago. Patricia cleared her throat softly. "Madam President, there is one more thing. We have been monitoring alien communication since we left the council. There is a lot of debate about what to do if the Ravagers attack us." "What kind of debate?" "Some species, like the Zilithians, are saying that humans chose to leave the council, so humans should face the consequences alone. But others, especially the architects, seem genuinely worried about what happens if the Ravagers destroy human space." Ryan nodded. "The Ravagers do not stop with one species. If they successfully attack human colonies, they will become stronger and bolder. Eventually, they will threaten council species too." Helen understood. The Ravagers were like a disease that spread from one victim to another. Letting them destroy human space would only make them more dangerous to everyone else later. She stood up again and looked out the window. The protesters were still there, but now she could see news vans and reporters gathering too. Word was probably already spreading about the Ravager threat. Soon every human in the galaxy would know that their species faced its greatest test. "I need to think," Helen said quietly. "Ryan, start preparing our fleets for possible combat. Patricia, reach out to any alien contacts who might be willing to help, but do it quietly. Danny, set up a meeting with the Joint Chiefs of Staff for tomorrow morning." As her advisors gathered their papers and prepared to leave, Helen remained, standing at the window. Somewhere out in space, a fleet of killers was heading toward human worlds. In 8 days, she would know if humanity's bold decision to leave the Council had been an act of courage or the biggest mistake in human history. The next week would test everything humans believed about themselves. Helen just hoped they would be strong enough to pass that test. Admiral Bobby Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, the biggest and newest warship in the human fleet. Around him, 41 other human ships moved through space toward the Kepler system. The ships looked small against the endless black of space, but each one carried hundreds of brave men and women ready to fight for their people. Bobby had been in the Earth military for 25 years. He had fought pirates before and won many battles, but he had never faced anything like what was coming. The reports from his scouts were clear. More than 200 Ravager ships were heading straight for human colonies, and they would arrive in less than 2 days. "Admiral," called Captain Susan Torres from her station near the communications equipment. "We are getting the final scans of the Ravager fleet. The numbers are confirmed. 237 enemy ships, including 15 of their biggest destroyers." Bobby nodded but felt his stomach tighten. The human fleet had 42 ships total. Even though human ships were well built and their crews were well trained, the numbers were terrible. More than 5 Ravager ships for every human ship. In a straight fight, those numbers meant certain death. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Gary Brooks, "from the sensor station, we are also detecting ships from many Council species at the edge of the system. They are staying far away from the combat zone, but they are definitely watching." Of course they were watching. Bobby knew that aliens from across the galaxy were curious to see if humans could back up their tough talk from 3 weeks ago. Many of them probably hoped to see the humans get beaten badly. It would prove that leaving the Council had been a stupid mistake. On the main screen, the planet Kepler came into view. It was a beautiful world with blue oceans and green continents. 10,000 human families lived there in cities and farms spread across 3 continents. Bobby had visited Kepler twice before during inspection tours. The people there were proud of what they had built, turning an empty world into a home for their children. "Admiral," came a voice from behind him. Bobby turned to see Colonel Amy Parker walking up to his command chair. She was in charge of all the ground troops in the fleet, soldiers who would board enemy ships or defend the colonies if the Ravagers managed to land. Her face looked serious and worried. "I have been listening to Council communications," Amy said, quietly so only Bobby could hear. "There is a big debate going on about whether they should help us if we start losing badly." "What are they saying?" "It is mixed. The purple tentacle aliens, the Zilithians, are arguing strongly against helping us. They say humans chose to leave the Council, so humans should face the consequences alone. But the tree-like architects seem genuinely worried about what happens if the Ravagers win here." Bobby thought about this. The Ravagers were a threat to everyone in the galaxy, not just humans. They were like a plague that spread from one star system to another, taking slaves and destroying anything they could not use. If they successfully attacked human space, it would only make them stronger and bolder for their next targets. "Admiral," Susan called out with urgency in her voice. "Incoming message from the Ravager fleet, audio only." The bridge became completely silent. Everyone stopped what they were doing to listen. The voice that came through the speakers was harsh and mechanical. The computer tried to translate it into English, but some words did not come through clearly. Still, the message was easy to understand. "Human ships, you are outnumbered and outgunned. Give us your colonies and we will let your military ships leave safely. Fight us and we will take everything and everyone." Bobby looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These men and women had families of their own. Many had relatives living on the colonies they were here to protect. He could see fear in their eyes, but he could also see determination. They knew what they had signed up for when they joined the military. Lieutenant Brooks spoke up from his station. "Sir, the Ravager fleet will be in weapons range in approximately 4 hours. 4 hours to live or die. 4 hours to prove that humanity deserved its place among the stars." Bobby thought about all the people counting on him. Not just the 10,000 civilians on Kepler, but every human being in the galaxy. If they lost here, it would show everyone that humans were weak and deserved to be conquered. "Open a channel to the Ravager fleet," Bobby ordered. Susan's fingers moved quickly over her controls. "Channel open, sir." Bobby took a deep breath and stood up from his command chair. Around him, every person on the bridge was watching and listening. He knew that his next words would be recorded and remembered, whether humanity won or lost the coming battle. "This is Admiral Bobby Chen of the United Earth Fleet," he said in a clear, strong voice. "Your offer is rejected. If you want our colonies, you will have to come and take them." He made a gesture to Susan to cut the communication channel. Then, he turned to his weapons officer, Lieutenant Commander Pete Williams. "All ships, battle stations, send a message to every captain in the fleet. Today we show the galaxy what humans are made of." Alarms began sounding throughout the Liberty. Red lights flashed as the ship prepared for combat. Bobby could hear similar alarms echoing from the other human ships through the communication system. 42 ships and their crews getting ready to face impossible odds. Amy stepped closer to Bobby. "Sir, do you really think we can win this?" Bobby looked at the tactical display showing the positions of both fleets. The Ravager force was massive, like a dark cloud moving toward the small cluster of human ships. By all logical calculations, the humans should lose badly and quickly. "I do not know if we can win," Bobby said honestly, "but I know we are going to try with everything we have, and maybe that will be enough." He thought about the families on Kepler below, probably looking up at the sky and wondering if they would survive the next day. He thought about President Carter on Earth, who had trusted him to protect human interests in space. He thought about Jake Morrison, whose angry words in the council chambers had started this whole situation. Most of all, he thought about what it meant to be human. Humans had always been fighters. When faced with impossible situations, they did not give up or surrender. They stood together and fought for what they believed in, even when the odds were hopeless. "Admiral," Susan called out, "all ships report, ready for battle." Bobby sat back down in his command chair and looked at the main screen. The Ravager fleet was getting closer, their ships looking like dark spots against the stars. Soon, the space around Kepler would be filled with weapons fire and explosions. Many good people would die in the next few hours, but they would die fighting for something important. They would die protecting innocent families and showing the galaxy that humans could not be pushed around. Whatever happened in the coming battle, Bobby was proud to stand with these brave men and women. "All ships," he said into his communication system. "This is Admiral Chen. In a few hours, we will face the biggest challenge in human history. Remember that we are not just fighting for ourselves. We are fighting for every human family in the galaxy. Make them count every shot. Make them pay for every inch. Show them that humans do not surrender." The battle for humanity's future was about to begin. The battle for Kepler system had been raging for 18 hours. Admiral Bobby Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, but it looked very different now. Smoke filled the air from damaged equipment. Sparks flew from broken control panels. The lights flickered on and off as the ship's power system struggled to keep working. Bobby's uniform was torn and dirty. Black marks covered his face from an explosion that had killed 2 of his bridge officers 6 hours ago. Around him, his remaining crew worked desperately to keep their ship fighting, but everyone could see they were losing. "Damage report," Bobby called out, his voice hoarse from shouting orders through the chaos. Captain Susan Torres looked up from her damaged station. Her left arm was in a makeshift bandage, and her face was pale from blood loss. "We have lost the Wellington and the Yorktown," she reported. "The new Chicago is leaking air from 3 different sections. The Frontier is running on emergency power only. Sir, we have destroyed 61 enemy ships, but they still have more than 3 times as many as us." Bobby nodded grimly. The human fleet had fought better than anyone could have expected. Human tactics and technology had allowed them to destroy many more Ravager ships than seemed possible. But mathematics did not lie. At this rate, the human fleet would be completely destroyed within 6 hours. Admiral, Lieutenant Gary Brooks called from his rebuilt sensor station. The observer ships from the Council species are still maintaining their positions. No sign that any of them plan to help us. The galaxy was watching humanity die, and they were doing nothing to stop it. Bobby wondered if this was what the Council had wanted all along. Maybe they thought letting the Ravagers destroy human space would teach other species not to challenge the established order. Colonel Amy Parker approached Bobby's command chair. Her armor was dented and scarred from leading boarding parties against Ravager ships that had tried to ram human vessels. 3 times she had led soldiers onto enemy ships to plant bombs before escaping back to friendly vessels. "Sir," Amy said, quietly, "I have been in contact with the colony on Kepler. They are asking permission to begin evacuation procedures." Bobby stared at the main screen, where the planet Kepler rotated peacefully below the battle. The people down there could probably see the explosions and weapon fire in space above them. They knew their fate was being decided by a battle they could not influence. "Negative," Bobby said after a long moment. "If we start evacuating now, we will never get everyone out in time. We hold the line here." A new voice suddenly cut through the noise of the bridge. "Admiral Chen, this is Ambassador Morrison aboard the diplomatic vessel Constitution. I am requesting permission to broadcast on all Council communication frequencies." Bobby frowned. Jake Morrison had insisted on joining the fleet despite having no military training or experience. His small diplomatic ship had been staying out of the main battle, but Bobby had wondered what the former ambassador was planning to do. "What do you have in mind, Morrison?" Bobby asked. "Something I should have said 3 weeks ago." Minutes later, Morrison's voice began broadcasting across space to every Council ship watching the battle, and beyond that to the Council chambers themselves. Bobby and his crew listened as the man who had started this crisis spoke to the entire galaxy. "Members of the Galactic Council, this is Jake Morrison, former human ambassador. Right now, 40,000 human military personnel are fighting and dying to protect 10,000 innocent civilians from a threat that endangers every peaceful species in this galaxy." Bobby looked around his bridge. His crew was listening intently, while continuing to fight their ship. On the tactical display, he could see human vessels continuing to engage the Ravagers despite being overwhelmed. Morrison continued, his voice carrying clearly through space. 3 weeks ago, we asked for your help when we were members of your council. You gave us committees and delays. We left your council in frustration, and you gave us trade embargoes and isolation. The bridge fell completely silent except for the sound of alarms and sparking electronics. Even in the middle of a desperate battle, everyone was listening to Morrison's words. "But here is what I want you to understand. We are not fighting just for ourselves anymore. Every Ravager ship we destroy here is one that will not attack your colonies next month. Every human life lost in this battle is a life spent protecting the principles that your council claims to represent." Bobby felt something stir in his chest. Morrison was right. This battle was not just about human survival. The Ravagers were a threat to every civilized species in the galaxy. If they won here, they would be stronger and more confident when they attacked other worlds. "We may have left your political organization," Morrison went on, "but we never abandoned the values that make civilization worth defending. We believe that innocent people deserve protection. We believe that those who can fight should stand up for those who cannot. We believe that doing the right thing matters more than political convenience." On his tactical screen, Bobby watched another human cruiser explode under concentrated Ravager fire. The crew of that ship had just died fighting for something bigger than themselves. They had died protecting not just human colonies, but the idea that evil should not be allowed to triumph simply because good people were too afraid or too comfortable to act. Morrison's voice grew stronger. "So watch us die if that is your choice, but remember that we died standing up for something greater than ourselves, and ask yourself what that says about the council that chose to let it happen." The communication ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Bobby looked at his crew and saw something he had not expected. Despite their injuries and exhaustion, despite knowing they were probably going to die, they looked proud. Morrison had reminded them why they were fighting, and it was bigger than any one species or planet. "Admiral," Susan called out, "we are receiving priority communications from multiple council ships. It seems Morrison's broadcast is causing quite a reaction." Bobby turned back to his tactical display. The human fleet was down to 28 functional ships. The Ravagers still had more than 150. By any reasonable calculation, the battle was already lost. But humans had never been reasonable. They had always fought harder when things looked hopeless. They had always found ways to win when everyone else said it was impossible. "All ships," Bobby announced over the fleet communication system. "This is Admiral Chen. Ambassador Morrison just reminded the galaxy what we are fighting for. We are not just defending human colonies. We are defending the idea that innocent people deserve protection from those who would harm them." He paused, looking around his damaged bridge at the faces of his crew. These men and women had given everything they had in this battle. They deserved to know their sacrifice meant something. "The council species are watching us," Bobby continued. "They want to see if humans can back up our principles when things get difficult. They want to know if we really believe the things we say about protecting the innocent and standing up to evil." Another explosion shook the Liberty as Ravager weapons found their target. Damage reports flooded in from all over the ship, but Bobby kept talking. "Well, they are about to find out. Every shot we fire, every ship we destroy, every minute we keep fighting, proves that humans mean what we say. Make them remember this battle. Make them remember that humans do not surrender when innocent lives are at stake." The battle continued, but now it felt different. The humans were still outnumbered and outgunned, but they were no longer fighting just for survival. They were fighting for something that would outlast any single battle or war. President Helen Carter stood in the Situation Room deep beneath the White House, surrounded by screens showing the terrible aftermath of the Battle of Kepler. The numbers on the displays told a story of both heroism and heartbreak that would be remembered for generations. The human fleet was gone. All 42 ships had been destroyed in the fighting. 42,000 of humanity's finest military personnel had died in space around Kepler. But their sacrifice had not been in vain. The Ravager fleet had taken such massive damage that the survivors had retreated deep into unexplored space. Their threat ended for years to come. "The colony survived," reported Secretary Ryan Walsh, though his voice carried no joy. "Admiral, Chen and his people bought enough time for reinforcements from the home fleet to arrive. When the Ravagers saw the additional human ships coming, they decided to retreat rather than face more losses." Helen nodded, but the victory felt hollow and bitter. The cost of proving human independence had been higher than anyone had imagined. 42,000 families would never see their loved ones come home. Director Patricia Kim cleared her throat softly. "Madam President, we are receiving priority communications from dozens of council species. It seems Ambassador Morrison's final broadcast had a very significant impact across the galaxy." "What kind of impact?" Helen asked, though she was not sure she wanted to know. "The Architect Assembly has passed a formal resolution condemning the Council's failure to act during the battle. They are saying the Council violated its own principles by allowing innocent people to be threatened while they did nothing." Patricia consulted her notes before continuing. "The Zilithian trade embargo has been lifted. Apparently, there were massive protests on their home worlds after Morrison's speech. Their own people were ashamed of their government's actions." Helen walked to the window, though it only showed the underground garage beneath the building. She thought about Jake Morrison, who had started this whole crisis with his angry words 3 weeks ago. His final speech had reached across space to touch the hearts of beings on dozens of different worlds. "What are the Council's official terms?" Helen asked. Patricia's voice became more formal. "Full restoration of Council membership, with humanity, granted permanent seats on both the Defense Committee and the Outer Rim Security Council. They are also offering to help rebuild our fleet and provide immediate aid to all affected colonies." Ryan leaned forward in his chair. "It is more than we ever had before we left, Madam President. Morrison's broadcast showed the entire galaxy what humanity really stands for when we are pushed to our limits. Respect cannot be given freely. It has to be earned, and apparently, we have earned it. Helen considered this news. The irony was not lost on her that humanity had gained more political power by leaving the council than they had ever achieved as members. But the price of that lesson had been written in the blood of heroes. There is something else, Patricia continued. We have received a personal message from the Counselor Prime herself. She wants to meet with you directly. Helen turned back to face her advisors. What does she want? To apologize, and to ask humanity to help reform the council from within. Apparently, our withdrawal and the response to our crisis has started a movement for change among many member species. Helen thought about this. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Council had operated the same way, avoiding conflict and maintaining the status quo. Perhaps it had taken a young, stubborn species like humanity to show them that sometimes action was more important than caution. There have been other developments too, Ryan added. Several species that supported us during the battle are now forming what they call the Active Defense Alliance. They want to create rapid response forces that can actually help threatened worlds instead of just talking about the problems. Patricia nodded. The architects have already committed 3 fleets to the new alliance. Even some of the insect-like hive species are interested. They say Morrison's speech reminded them that civilization requires people willing to fight for it. Helen sat down heavily in her chair. Outside, she knew memorial services were being planned across human space. 42,000 heroes would be honored, but their families would still grieve. The victory felt too expensive. What do our people think about rejoining the council? She asked. The polls show strong support, Patricia replied. Most humans feel that our sacrifice proved our point. We showed the galaxy that we deserved respect, and now we have it. They want us to use that respect to make sure something like this never happens again. Helen nodded slowly. That made sense. The goal had never been to remain isolated forever. The goal had been to be treated as equals, not children. Danny Foster, her aide, entered the room quietly. His usual cheerful expression was subdued, but he carried what looked like good news. Madam President, he said, we just received a message from the Kepler colony. They want to name their capital city Morrison in honor of the ambassador. They say his final speech saved not just their world, but showed the galaxy what humanity really believes in. Helen felt tears forming in her eyes. Jake Morrison had been angry and frustrated when he walked out of the council chambers. But his final words had become a rallying cry for every species that believed in protecting the innocent. Schedule the meeting with the Counselor Prime, Helen decided, but make it clear that humanity will not return to the old system. If we rejoin the council, it will be as partners who expect to be heard when we speak. Ryan smiled for the first time in weeks. I think Admiral Chen and his people would approve of that condition, Madam President. Helen nodded, thinking of the 42,000 souls who had paid the ultimate price for humanity's independence. Their sacrifice had taught the galaxy a lesson about human determination, but it had also taught humanity something important about the true cost of standing alone. Draft a response to the council, she told Patricia. Tell them we are willing to discuss returning, but only if real changes are made. No more committees that meet for months while people die. No more bureaucracy that values procedure over protection of innocent lives. Patricia made notes quickly. What about the new Active Defense Alliance? We will join that too, Helen decided. Humanity will work with any species that shares our belief in actually helping those who need protection. As her advisors gathered their papers and prepared to leave, Helen remained sitting at the table. Through the walls and floors above her, she could feel the weight of a world mourning its heroes while also celebrating their courage. The stars were vast and full of dangers, but they were also full of potential friends who had learned to respect the species that would fight impossible odds rather than abandon their principles. Humanity would return to the council, but they would return as equals, tested by fire and proven by sacrifice. Jake Morrison's angry exit from the council chambers had started a chain of events that changed the galaxy. His final speech had reminded every civilized species what they were supposed to stand for. and Admiral Chen's fleet had proved that some things were worth dying for. The age of human isolation was ending. But the age of human influence among the stars was just beginning. The galaxy had learned that humans meant what they said, and that lesson would echo across the stars for generations to come. 42,000 heroes had made sure of that.